Hello students, so myself Shubhra Bhende from Government College KPM. I am working as an assistant professor. So the title of my unit is Adaptive and Protective System. This is the chapter 4 from the syllabus. Module name is Epidermis, cutin, cuticle and other types of coverings. Outline: Epidermis is a protective layer for plants. Role of cuticles in plant. Learning outcomes. Following things, that is listing out the general plants. This is a very important topic. Then listing out of functions of epidermis, the general function and the protective functions of epidermis. Next, the mentions the components of cuticle and significance of cutin. Cutin is one of the very important part in cuticle. Next is the other protective layers present on epidermis. Apart from the epidermis, which functions as a protective layer, there are other structures which are having the same function but in a different way. So let's start with the topic. The title of the unit is Adaptive and Protective Systems in Plant. Now what are adaptive and protective systems? They are the structures or the layers which are present on the plant surfaces, whose role is to protect the plants from the adverse climatic condition or from the pathogen which invade the plant tissues. First, we'll start with the epidermis. What are the general features? As all of you all know this, and you all have studied this in your school time, that it is the outermost layer of the cell, exterior layer. In roots, it is known as rhizodermis or epiblem. Now, why it is so? In the other parts like the shoot, stem and other areas of the plant, apart from roots, the epidermis is derived from meristematic tissues. Now, meristematic tissues are the actively growing regions of the plants, whereas in the roots, it is derived from the cortical cells, because of which it is known as rhizodermis or epiblem. So, the last feature in this particular slide is that it is replaced by a special kind of tissue that is known as periderm. It is a thick tissue which replaces the outer layer, that is the epidermis, and this particular tissue comes after particular years of life. That is when the tree completes 2 years or 3 years, depending upon the tree species, the epidermis gets replaced by a thick tissue. Now the types. Usually epidermis is thought to be single layered. All of us believe that epidermis is the outermost layer and single layered. When it is just single layered, we name it as uniseriate epidermis. And this particular epidermis, that is single layered epidermis, we found in grass species. Second, sometimes it is multi-layered, more than 2 layers. That time we call it multiseriate epidermis. This particular condition we found in nerium leaf, velamen tissue in orchids and ficus leaf. Now, when we come to multiple epidermis or multicellate epidermis, there are specific features which I will be explaining you all later. Before that, we see the image of the uniseriate epidermis, that is single layered epidermis. This is a transverse section of grass leaf which is observed under the microscope, showing the single layer of epidermis, uniseriate epidermis, which is marked with the arrow. Next is transverse section of nerium leaf, that is nerium oleander species. The arrow designates the multiseriate epidermis. Here it is more than 3 layers. The topmost portion you can see which is pink in color. As I mentioned you all, in multiseriate epidermis, multiple epidermis, there are many layers of epidermis. But before this, there is a specific structures which we find in that multiple epidermis. Now, before going into that structure, ficus species or ficus microcarpa species. Initially, when the leaf is very young, covered with the stipules, it is just single layered. Once the stipules are shared, the epidermis starts dividing. Anticlinal and periclinal division occurs. And the divisions which occur on the inner side of the epidermis, they are much faster than outer layer. So when these divisions are occurring, one of the cell in the inner portion, it gets expanded. It increases in size and there is a cylindrical structure which is formed in that cell that is known as cystolith. It has got its stalk attached to the outer layer and that enlarged cell is known as lithocyst. Now what is the function of cystolith or that particular cell? The exact function is not known, research is going on that. But the general function is what? It is known to redistribute the light in the leaf, which is going to increase the efficiency of photosynthesis. Now the general functions, adaptive and protective function of epidermis in general. First is the presence of compact layer of cells. That is, the cells lack intracellular spaces. Very important point. The intracellular spaces are absent because if the intracellular spaces were present in the outer layer of epidermis, then the pathogens can easily enter into the plant tissue. So, because of that, compact arrangement of cells, relatively tough cuticle. Cuticle is very important portion in epidermis, which we are going to discuss later. Next is reduction of water loss by transpiration. Mechanical protection provides rigidity to the cell and gaseous exchange through stomata. It is also a site of light perception involved in cardiac leaf movement. Next point is epidermal cells of both shoot and root are involved in the absorption of water and other solutes. It is a protective layer against UVB radiation induced injuries. Whenever the injuries occur in the mesophyll region due to UVB radiation, it helps as a protective layer against that. Next is cuticle. It is the first and the principal protective barrier against any kind of pathogen entering into the plant tissue. It is a distinctive feature of outer epidermal wall. Now what does cuticle made up of? It consists of cutin together with embedded waxes. In exceptional cases, cuticles are formed in the cortical cells, which give rise to a protective tissue known as cuticular epithelium. Usually cuticles are derived from the epidermis, but in sometimes exceptional cases it is derived from cortical cells, which give rise to cuticular epithelium. Now we come to the components of cuticle. Components can be broadly classified as two different layers, that is, what is present in the matrix of the cuticle and what is present on the surface of the cuticle. Matrix include insoluble cutin and cutan along with intracellular waxes. Surface includes soluble waxes and epicuticular waxes. Now, in cutin and cutan has got very significant role. That is, it is reported as a major constituent in fossilized plant material. Unlike cutan is highly resistant to alkaline hydrolysis. It is principal matrix polymer in Beta vulgaris. Next, mixed cutan and cutin have been reported in many extinct species. That is, as I mentioned here, it is found as a major constituent in fossilized plant material. That is, Picea abies, Gossipum species, Melas primula and Agave americana. Next is the structure of cuticle. Initially, when the cuticle starts forming, it is just one layer, and that amorphous layer is known as procuticle. Later, it gets divided into two layers, that is, first layer is cuticular proper, which you all can see in this image, which is marked as 1, and second layer is other cuticular layers. Now, cuticular proper, that is consists of epicuticular wax, whereas the second layer consists of pectin, hemicellulose and soluble waxes. The process by which cuticular proper is formed, that is the first layer is formed, that is known as cuticularization, whereas the second layer is formed by a process known as cutinization. Now the functions of cuticle. It is highly inert and resistant to maceration methods. When the maceration methods are performed on wood, it is very difficult for oxidizing maceration methods. It does not decay because no microorganism possesses cutin or cutan degrading enzyme. It is preserved as fossil material because of its chemical stability, and due to this property, it is a major constituent in fossilized plant material. Next is other types of covering. These include stomata, which are present on the epidermal surfaces. Trichomes, very important role, and in trichomes there are different functions. One of the major one is it acts against herbivory. Then other specialized cells include bulliform cells, cystoliths and phytolith heads on the epidermis. We have seen this cystolith function before, and now role of bulliform cell is when the plant is under stress, bulliform cells help the leaf to curve inside. The leaves are curved inside. This happens during the drought when there is scarcity of water. The image is transverse section of grass leaf. The cells which are enlarged on the upper portion, those cells are known as the bulliform cells. These are the references which I have used to make this particular module. Thank you.